Dave Aranda just outcoached a guy who was coaching for a national championship 2 years ago, and he did it in a big-time rivalry game. It's Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up there, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day, because part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Bears coming off a big-time win in the Revivalry. We will talk about the hero of that game, why Dave Aranda might have just saved himself a little bit more in terms of his job at Baylor with his performance on Saturday night. Plus, we got top 10 Baylor Bears basketball tonight. Let's preview that for you as well. All that coming up and more on this episode of Locked On Baylor. 37-34, the final score. Baylor knocks off TCU at the buzzer. Isaiah Hankins with the game winner. Bryson Washington with the game of his college football career. So many little plays that helped the Bears in this one, but really the performance of Bryson Washington and the performance of this team's rushing attack over the last few weeks has gotten them to 3 wins in a row. How about that, by the way? The Bears went into their first bye week of the year with 3 straight losses going into it. They enter their second bye week of the year with 3 straight wins. That goes to show, man. That goes to show the progress right there. And a huge part of it has been in those 3 games, you have rushed for over 250 yards in each of them. Another huge running game, again, 257 on the ground. You have ran for, I want to say it's 854 yards. 854 yards in 3 games. Is that good? It sure as heck ain't bad. This was a team that could not establish the run this year. In fact, I went up here after game 1 against Tarleton, which they won, I think it was 45-3. And I was like, yeah, but they didn't really get any running action. I don't think they rushed for 100 yards in that game against Tarleton, FCS Tarleton. I was like, that's not good. That's really not a great look. We'll see. And then obviously the bottom fell out of it. They definitely didn't do it against Utah. They had a brief glimpse of it against Air Force. And then the 2 Big 12 games that they lost, or 3 Big 12 games they lost in a row, they could not establish the run. And here we are 3 wins later as one of the best rushing teams in the entire Big 12. Now, does it help that you have gone against 3 rush defenses in the last 3 weeks that are 8th place or worse in the Big 12 in that department? Yes, it does. But you've also made it happen. And Bryson Washington had one of the best games by a Baylor running back in a decade. We were saying that about Sawyer Robertson for the Baylor quarterback against Tech, saying that it was one of the best quarterback games by a Bear in the last decade. You can say the same thing about Bryson Washington for the running back position. 26 attempts for 196 and 4 touchdowns. 4 touchdowns. 4. At 7.5 yards to carry. 7.5 yards to carry at 26 attempts. That's pretty good. Dawson Pendergrass had the 24 per carry on 6 carries last week, and that was a good, obviously great game and a pretty good sample size in there. How about that for a bell cow sample size at 26 attempts and 7.5 per? To the point where they were pretty confident in him to get the yardage they needed to get a chip shot field goal at the end of the game. But more on that specific aspect of it later on in the show. I have said when Baylor can go between 150 and 200 yards in rushing, they're going to be good. They're going to win the game because everything else Sawyer Robertson can handle. He is proven to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 since he's taken the job over. Had a fine game on Saturday, 19 for 34, 242, no touchdowns, but no picks. Wasn't his best game ever in a Baylor uniform. In fact, I didn't think they passed the ball all that well in the first half of this one. But when you're living in that 150 to 200, it's going to be okay. You're going to find a way. And what they did was they've lived past that the last few weeks at 257 on the ground in this game against TCU. They are bullying teams. And that probably changes when you're not facing teams that are pretty bad against the run, but they have won the last few weeks by overwhelming teams in the trenches. And that's going to be a big test when they take on West Virginia in a couple of weeks, because the Mountaineers do have a good run defense. But Bryson Washington has written his name into rivalry lore and therefore Baylor football lore. And I said this on the postgame Saturday night, but you don't have a ton of like Baylor legends yet, but you have the makings of Baylor legends on this team. Bryson Washington, Sawyer Robertson, Josh Cameron, who it's been confirmed does have another year after this. Caden Jenkins, Keaton Thomas has a couple years left. You know, you are seeing the seeds of what could be Baylor legends on these teams, because I hold these guys in that higher regard. I think they've been that good. I think Sawyer Robertson was that good even when they were losing. The same thing about Josh Cameron. You know, Keaton Thomas had a lot of great expectations for this year, and he's really come into his own the last few weeks again. So I truly do believe that. And one guy who will at least have a one-game designation as a Baylor legend is Isaiah Hankins, for kicking that one through the uprights from 33 yards to win the dang thing as the clock hit 0. And how about that moment for that kid? Isaiah Hankins was much maligned when he missed that. I think it was a 36-yarder against Colorado up in Boulder, and that would have put the game away. That would have put him up 10 with really only time for one possession left for the Buffs. Missed it. Buffs come down. Shedeur throws a Hail Mary. They lose the game in overtime. And there's probably some not nice things said about Isaiah Hankins, you know, around the message boards and on social media. And the next week against BYU, he's not kicking. He lost his job. Connor Hawkins was kicking the extra points in that game. They didn't attempt a field goal in that game, by the way. But he had lost his job. He gets it back. He's been pretty solid ever since. And he nails that game winner. And not to bring up the bad stuff, but one of the reasons he wasn't completely solid since was because he missed a PAT in that game. So they needed a game-winning field goal, but he went out there and did it. He went out there and kicked the game winner. And what a moment for him specifically, as a guy who, again, had lost his job just a month ago and is coming back and kicking the game-winning field goal against TCU to finally beat TCU again. Only the second time in a decade. First time they've beaten them at McLean since that 61-58 game. So there might have been a little 2014, 2013 magic for those teams that were in the building and got to see that. Great recognition to have them out there during halftime. Presentation was a little bit scattered in terms of, like, you know, they didn't name off the guys. There was like a long time that was just music playing and not an announcement. But very happy that those guys, as we talked about a lot last week, very happy that those guys got their moment and got to see such an awesome Baylor victory. It was about time. It was about time you beat these guys. 5 years to not beat TCU is too long. And once in the last decade is not good enough. And this was the first time that Dave Aranda actually beat TCU. And he went out there and deserved to beat TCU because he outcoached Sonny Dykes in this game. We're going to talk about just how he did that and two plays that really illustrate that coming up next on this episode of Locked On Baylor. But today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, and I don't have the read-up, so I'm going to bring it up right now. You guys know that college football, it's a stressful time of year, and our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through those all-day tailgates, the touchdown celebrations, or, you know, those agonizing last few minutes of a game against TCU, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and last to leave. We see you. You know what gives me a bit of fan fuel this week? How about a top 10 matchup late on a Monday night? So you're going to need this 5 Hour Energy, okay? 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy, especially when you know the game's going to end at about 12:30 Central Time. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate, or you're ironing your jersey, or you're getting that the pipes ready for that good old Baylor line. That to-do list is a mile long. That's why limited edition Stand the Fan 5-hour energy shot is here to help you keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5-hour energy. Available at 5hourenergy.com and shipping nationwide. So yeah, finally, Dave Aranda gets his first win in this rivalry since he took over as the Baylor head coach in 2020. They've certainly had their chances to win this game. 2020, they were pretty evenly matched. 2021, they were not evenly matched because Baylor was much better. They still lost. 2022, not evenly matched, but Baylor had them on the ropes, was about to knock TCU out of the 14 playoff. Wasn't to be. And then last year, kind of evenly matched. Neither team made a bowl game, and TCU wiped the floor with Baylor, just wiped the floor with them. And this time around, both teams came in with momentum, both coming off big-time victories. Baylor over Oklahoma State, TCU over Tech. They both won a couple in a row. Both these coaches were on the hot seat earlier this year. One of them, at least, might still be on the hot seat. But Dave Aranda outcoached Sonny Dykes in this game. Sonny Dykes, who brought TCU to the national championship game 2 years ago. And now, much like the Dave Aranda fallacy of what we were looking at a few weeks ago, many of the TCU fans are wondering the same thing about their coach. Well, did he do it? Did he have his best season, his only great season as head coach with somebody else's players? We've been saying it about that with Baylor in that Sugar Bowl in 2021. And they're starting to say that about Sonny Dykes in that 2022 run to the national championship game. Was it Gary's team that Sonny just, took over at the end and got him into the garage? Many are saying. But really, it comes down to me two plays that ensured that Dave Aranda outcoached Sonny Dykes, because it didn't look like it was heading that way. I don't think Baylor made great second half adjustments on defense, which I had called for at halftime of like, hey, TCU cannot run the ball. They do not have a running game. They're completely one-dimensional, and they were killing Baylor in that one dimension. Josh Hoover, good quarterback, heck of a receiving core. Should have had a touchdown in the second quarter. Trying to remember who it was, just completely dropped it in the middle of the field. No one was ever near him. It could have been a TCU touchdown. Instead, it was a punt. So all that to say, like, TCU's offense was going with what they had. Again, no running back, none at all. Good game, Kendall Briles, because they were dialing things up and had Baylor on the ropes. They scored 5 of their last 6 possessions. But what I want to look at is that possession they did not score. Dave Aranda's got things to work on. That defensive backfield needs some work. We're going to talk about that throughout this week. It needs some work. But where Dave Aranda got the upper hand and eventually took over and won in this coaching battle was that one possession in the second half that TCU did not score. Because they've got the ball at the Baylor 46 with about 10 minutes left. It's a 4th and 2. And they punted it. I remember thinking at the time, man, if Dave Aranda did that and Baylor lost this game, we would be crushing him this whole week. What kind of sissy doesn't go for it on 4th and 2 from the plus 46 when they haven't stopped you on 4 straight drives to that point? And so I got to ask the same question to Sonny Dykes. What are you doing? I know you don't have a run game. It's not like you've been running all over them and you could just 4th and 2 easy, but they haven't stopped you. They couldn't cover anybody. Again, 4 straight scoring drives leading up to that. And you have a chance to really push them to the edge of the cliff here. And it was a tie game at that time. It was 27-27. You could have really put the pressure on him. You didn't. You punted. Baylor comes down and scores a touchdown. They did it for it was a touchback. So 20 yards of field position in a game like this. I'm sorry, man. That was a bad call at the time. Became a terrible call once Baylor wins the game. And so no matter if you're an offensive coach, defensive coach, if you're calling plays, if you're not calling plays, the head coach makes the decision on 4th down and whether to go for it. Sonny Dykes put his punt unit out there. Dave Aranda showed some serious balls on Baylor's final drive. And it's one of those calls that if you don't get it, it's really dumb. And if you do get it, you have a lot of balls. Dave Aranda had a lot of balls on that because I thought it was a dumb call, and they ended up getting it. It's 4th and 9. They had just picked up the flag for pass interference that would have put the ball at the 29-yard line. You've got it at the 44. There's about 16 seconds left, and he's going for it. He sends his offense out there on 4th and 9. Sonny calls timeout, and I'm sitting up there thinking, okay, they tried to draw him offside, whatever. But obviously they're not going to go for it on 4th and 9 here because TCU is going to get the ball near midfield with a timeout now remaining after Sonny calls one, and all they need is a field goal. So one play and they're there. The way you've been covering all night, that could well happen, right? And then the timeout ends. And then Baylor's offense goes back out there and they run a play on 4th and 9. Ball's dragging on the turf, man, because Michael Trigg comes up with the big catch, 15 yards, gets you to the 29 where you were going to be anyway. And then they continue to drag those on the turf. They run it to Bryson Washington, who will not go down, gives you 13 yards, sets up a 33-yard field goal, and we are walking off winners. Dave Aranda outcoached Sonny Dykes with that. Dave Aranda was more aggressive and had more confidence in his team when Sonny Dykes probably should have had more confidence in his team. And that's how you win these games. And I think to some degree, Dave Aranda realized that. This was not like hey, I'm making a statement here. This is him saying, I believe in this team and we're going to win this game because of this. And I can't remember which player said it in the postgame as I was driving home, taking a half hour to get out of the media parking lot. But they said, they were asked, JMO asked him about that 4th and 9 call. It was one of the offensive linemen, I believe, Lengyel, said, we want to win games on offense. And that's what they did. This team wins games with offense and on offense. And I think that goes a long way of what we were saying during the losing streak, that this team had no identity. We didn't know what kind of team they were. We didn't know what kind of game they would have to win games. We didn't know what they were going to do to, expose other teams' weaknesses and play to their strengths. They just told us. They told us with that 4th and 9 call. We want to win games with our offense, and we want to win games on offense. I do need to take a minute. I talk about this in the postgame, but I need to take a minute for two things. One of them is the disgrace of the Big 12 officiating. So Baylor gets it at the 1-yard line. They get called for a false start, moves them back to the 6. Then they run up and they run a play. It's basically a trick play. It's a jump pass, like the old Tebow jump pass. Sawyer Robertson leans into the line, drops back, jumps it, throws to the fullback, touchdown Baylor. Except they threw a flag as the ball was being snapped. And the reason why was to clarify to anyone who would listen that the call before was a false start. Okay, we knew that. And so then Baylor's pissed, right? Because now they have a quote-unquote trick play that's on tape, and they can't use that anymore. And then Baylor goes to the line again, 2nd and goal from the 6, 1st and goal from the 6, and they throw a flag right as the ball's about to be snapped again. So they've shown their formation to Sonny Dykes and TCU. And the flag this time was to review a play that was kind of 2 plays earlier, but only 1 play earlier because it was a dead play. So now they're reviewing the first play. And it ends up being offsetting penalties because TCU had too many men on the field, which they didn't call the first time. So Baylor now has 2 formations on tape there. They can't run those plays. Like important, basically 2-point plays down at the goal line where you're waiting all season to see when you're going to take these plays out. Can't use those anymore. That's a big time advantage to the defense. Huge advantage to TCU there. Horrible officiating. What are we doing there? We throw 3 flags for 1 penalty. It just blows my mind. And the other thing, too, the fans storming the field. How dare you storm the field against a 5-4 team? Are you kidding me? No, I'm not kidding you. Storm the field. Yes, I have been one who's like, dude, who cares when they storm the field? Really at the end of the day, who cares? If it's a fun win for your fans, there's only so many times you can do it. I never got to do it as a student. So don't take that for granted. That is a good thing to do. And I got to give credit to Dean Straka, who covers TCU, was at the game for TCU. And he tweeted out there, was like, a lot of people are going to say it was dumb that they rushed the field. But honestly, rivalries like this are being taken out of college football. We're losing them year after year after year. And the fact that there is a game where both teams are going to be 5-4 at the end of it, and it can mean that much to a fan base, we need more of that. We should not be poo-pooing that. We should be encouraging that. Take the fine, okay? And who cares what anybody else says? This game meaning something, Baylor and TCU meaning something, is good for college football because we are taking out these rivalries all the time for the sake of more Washingtons versus Michigan and less Baylor versus Texas. We're eliminating these games. We want more of USC, Ohio State, and less of Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. And that's wrong. And so when we do get a game like this that is preserved and means something to both of these fan bases, we need to encourage that. We need to keep that, and we need to celebrate accordingly. If TCU did the same thing, last year against Baylor, whatever. Like that's what college football is about. Keep storming the field for games like that. And maybe we'll be storming the court this year because we are ready for a top 10 Baylor basketball matchup tonight, late tonight. Let's go over that and tell you about these new look Bears coming up on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I want you to get ready to tackle the rest of the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of that game, you're going to be able to check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Basketball, Curtis Blow's favorite sport. Kick it off tonight, and I do mean tonight, not evening, night, and into tomorrow morning. 10:30 p.m. tip in the Central Time Zone right after Monday Night Football. How about that for a lead-in for you on the ESPN family of networks? It's Baylor and Gonzaga. 6 versus 8, 2 top 10 teams rolling out there, and 2 teams with a bunch of history, as you will well know from the 2021 National Championship game. I found this very interesting in my research for this game. I know not a lot of us love Jeff Goodman. Baylor does. Baylor is an institution, and Scott Drew does. But I was listening to the Field of 68 podcast the other day. They were doing their top 10 preview and kind of going through the teams, and it was numbers 5 through 10, their rankings. They had Gonzaga 6th and Baylor 7th, and then Duke 8th and North Carolina 9th. And you better believe all they talked about in this 10-minute segment was Duke and UNC and UConn, who wasn't even in those 5 slots. That's all they talked about. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, seriously? This is still the battle that we have to battle. Both Baylor and Gonzaga have to battle. These are 2 teams that played the national championship game 3 seasons ago. Was not all that long ago. And both have been pretty damn good ever since. And by the way, they're both in your top 10 and playing game 1. And they knew that. They're playing game 1 of the season. And all they can talk about is Duke's roster and Duke's backcourt. Seriously? This is what we're still doing in 2024? It's the best college basketball game on the schedule, game 1. And all they care about is Duke. Goodman and Fanta and two of these other talking heads that are on there. They just want to talk about Duke and Carolina. I know we're not the name brands that those guys are, but it's two top 10 teams with new look rosters, new guys in there, two great coaches. It's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere in Spokane, both with Final Four aspirations. And by the way, they're not playing in February. They're playing right now. You can talk about the intrigue of this game right now. So that's still where we're at in college basketball, which really sucks that this has to become an island of misfit toys matchup. Two teams that are in the top 10. Screw them. Screw the national stuff. Okay? You listen to me. You listen to Andy Patton of Locked On Zags. You listen to Locked On College Basketball with Andy Patton and Isaac Shade, who will talk Baylor Gonzaga more than his team, Carolina, today. Listen to us. Don't listen to all of that, because this is a great matchup to kick off the college basketball season. Tip off the college basketball season. This Gonzaga team is rolling in some new guys. This is what I find so intriguing about this matchup, not only because, it's game one. So we're seeing, new teams for sure, but both these teams are mixing in some big time new pieces. The Gonzaga has added Michael Ajayi. I don't actually know how you say it, but he's from Pepperdine, all WCC player. This dude was a walking double-double last year, okay, who was, putting up numbers against Gonzaga. They saw him twice a year at Pepperdine and were like, we got to bring this kid in here. First team all WCC player, now going to Gonzaga. Usually those guys are already playing for Gonzaga. And one of the guys I really liked out of the portal, Khalif Battle, the guard from Arkansas who had played at Temple and Butler, I think. This kid was averaging 15 points a game for Arkansas last year, and all the Gonzaga people are saying he's coming off the bench. Okay, this is a loaded Zags roster again. A ton of guys coming back too. By the way, last year of the COVID eligibility thing, which is something I do want to explore from a Baylor standpoint in the coming weeks here as we get more into basketball season. But Zags are, a hot pick for the Final Four, and an outside pick for the Final Four is this Baylor team. I am so pumped for this. My man, Armstrong Sims, if you haven't seen it on Twitter, look up Armstrong Sims. I have also reposted it on my Twitter and the Locked On Baylor Twitter. He did this sick 2.5-minute hype video, taking you through Scott Drew's career and the rise of Baylor basketball and getting you ready for this season. And man, oh man, I am ready to run through a brick wall. That alone, plus the Stan the Fan 5-hour energy shot, will be what gets me through this game, which will probably have a very, very late live post-game show for those of you who stay up with it. It will probably just be tomorrow's episode, by the way. Armstrong put up that video. He also put out yesterday who you think Baylor's leading scorer is going to be. And we have talked about so many of these new pieces in here, freshmen and the transfer portal. And yet I was wondering, that's a good question. I'm wondering who is going to be the leading scorer for this team. Norchad Omier, walking double-double. Jeremy Roach can be a guy who could be a 15-point-a-game guy. VJ Edgecombe going to be a top 5 pick in the draft. Who is it going to be? So much to love about this Baylor team. And we're not going to learn it all tonight, but we're going to get an awesome sneak preview tonight because, it was a fun opening matchup last year with Auburn up at the Pentagon. And you saw, Yves Missi break onto the scene, right? Jacoby had a really good game too, 28 points for the freshman. And, Yves Missi has that steal on the inbound and like tomahawk throwdown. Like we're going to see some moments like that tonight. And whether it's going to be Norchad Omier or Jeremy Roach or Joshua Jamuna, who's wearing number 17, which did not used to be allowed in college basketball. That is not a basketball number, which means he is coming for throats this year. VJ Edgecombe apparently can make a SportsCenter top 10 play every night. We're going to see some Rob Wright. We're going to see some Jason Asamoah. We're going to see some Jalen Celestine. I am so jacked for this team. And I really think that they can go out there and win the Big 12 in the regular season. As good as the Big 12 is, especially at the top. It's not just top heavy. It's that good, but I think Baylor can really do that. And if they can do that, they can make a Final Four. We'll get our first look at that tonight. Let me know what you think how this game is going to play out. Give me your score prediction. Who do you think the leading scorer is going to be for this Baylor team all season long? Drop that down in the comments below. How about Dave Aranda's hot seat? It's getting just a little bit cooler for you. It is for me. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that much. I thought he coached a good game overall. And if he works on that defensive backfield before this West Virginia game, that'll be another big plus on his side. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I appreciate the heck out of you guys. Our numbers for that post-game show, which started at 12:15 a.m., were awesome. I love you guys, man. I really appreciate this community that we've built and Locked On Baylor. We are like literally can count on two hands how many subscribers we need for 3,000. So be sure to like and subscribe. That helps out the channel a lot. I never thought we would be doubling the subscribers number when I took over this podcast just over a year ago. But you guys have made for an unbelievable community in growing this pod. So I super appreciate that. Again, like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we drop a video on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you in the wee hours of the morning, breaking down a top 10 matchup between Baylor and Gonzaga right here on Locked On Baylor.